You're listening to The Alex Jones Show. Crashing through the lies and disinformation, it's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Nobody stages false flag terror attacks in this country and gets away with it. You may get away with it in your kangaroo courts. You may get away with it with your dying dinosaur media, but in the real court of public opinion, where the rubber meets the road, everybody knows who carried out the Oklahoma City terror attack 20 years ago today, April 19th, 1995. And it's already 2015. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a power-packed, very informative, staggering transmission today. Joe Biggs is back from the border. He met with the counterterrorism folks from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He went across the border and where Judicial Watch has reported an ISIS training base. He'll have breaking news with us on that front. We have huge vaccine news. We have mainstream media trying to claim that the mainline Republican Party and conservatives are basically all Tim McVeigh's. That story's up on Infowars.com. We've got Iran ship convoy moves towards Yemen, alarming U.S. officials. We've got a mystery illness that's killed 18 people in 24 hours. We've just got a lot of really important news today and some pro-Second Amendment news, some vaccine news. It's all coming up. But first, an extremely informative report that Leanne McAdoo filed on some of the brainwashing and propaganda going on in Congress that we covered earlier in the week. But she really crystallizes it, where they're implying that bloggers, period, are like cult members or ISIS. You can't make this up. Here's our report, then we'll be back.
Almost like a cult, I would say, that is formed online, and they mobilize and they feel like they are part of some enlightened fight against the establishment. They find an outlet where they can a platform to voice their deranged views.
That was former RT host Liz Wall testifying about the big bad internet, saying that it provides a platform for fringe voices and extremists, and what a problem it is that conspiracy theorists are dominating online discussions, bypassing all those paid government trolls, and able to be so effective that they're riling up massive amounts of people. Oh goodness. Wall was called on as an expert witness at a House Foreign Relations Committee hearing titled Confronting Russia's Weaponization of Information. Now, the threat there is not combat weapons or war games, but rather the growing popularity of alternative TV and radio programming that challenges the establishment narrative. Could that be because people are ready for a little bit of truthful news? Now, Wall also went on to characterize those of us involved in this pushback as cult members, completely oblivious of the fact that blindly gobbling up and regurgitating the state narrative of your dear leader without question is, in fact, cultish behavior. Wall gained notoriety last year for quitting Russian state media during a live broadcast. There was a totally inauthentic move that had been planned months in advance and was orchestrated with the help of James Kirchick, who is a former employee of Radio Free Europe. Radio Free Europe, along with the Voice of America, have been pumping pro-U.S. propaganda around the globe for decades. It's been very effective.
That's
so clearly
pro-globalist.
it's a case of do as I say, not as I do. Now, when Wall talks about RT being a network that doesn't play by the rules, she's speaking of the unspoken rule of reciting White House talking points. Now, there's no doubt RT definitely puts out pro-Russian propaganda, but it also broadcasts truths about geopolitics and foreign policy that Americans will never see on mainstream corporate networks, precisely because those networks are engaged in propaganda.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
But rather than change their methods to, actual transparency and truth-telling, they are desperately trying to stifle the rising alternative voices that are effectively promoting freedom. I'm Leanne McAdoo for Infowars.com.
That's right, folks. And again, Leanne, when she makes the point saying pro-U.S. propaganda, she means globalist propaganda that's already destroyed the U.S. effectively. She means New World Order propaganda. They just use us as their command base.
I was born on the prairies where the wind blew free, and there was nothing to break the light of the sun. I was born where there were no enclosures. Geronimo. I wonder what he thinks of the permanent checkpoints, where you're quizzed about your citizenship, about having to submit to bag searches to ride public transportation, his thoughts on nonviolent offenders rotting away in prisons. They say that in these current times we are more, quote, civilized, but are we really more free? When the Persian army demanded King Leonidas and his Spartans surrender their arms, the outnumbered king shouted Molon Labe, or come and take them. Even though Leonidas was eventually defeated by a much larger adversary, he is not remembered for his loss. He lives in history as a beacon of defiance and self-defense. The desire to disarm the people is nothing new. Arm yourself with knowledge at Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.tv, and the Alex Jones channel on YouTube.
Crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Waging war on corruption. I'm your host, Alex Jones. Thank you for joining us. We're live on this Sunday transmission, 4 to 6 p.m. Central, airing on stations across the country and re-aired by many others. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, affiliates, for carrying the transmission. Thank you for spreading the word about this important syndicated radio/TV news program. With open commentary and open opinion, leaning strongly and unapologetically towards liberty and freedom and family and self-defense and private property and sovereignty and defending the old, defending veterans, defending the unborn, treating people like we want to be treated. That's what you're going to get here. We wear it openly on our sleeve, the sickening bias of telling the truth, according to the establishment. The sickening bias of studying history and reading the legislation and really knowing what's going on. We commit that cardinal sin every minute, actually researching what's going on. And then raising the alarm worldwide. Thank you again for joining us on this Sunday transmission. The weekday broadcast, of course, is 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Joe Biggs is going to be in studio with us for several segments. He and our intrepid cameraman, Josh Owen, went down to the Mexico border. Joe Biggs went in with some of his old contacts when he was stationed down there in the U.S. Army at Fort Bliss. Went into one of the most dangerous areas, probably the most dangerous. In fact, they say it's the most dangerous area in Mexico, right across from that U.S. military base there in El Paso. They have found hundreds of mass graves with hundreds of people, in some cases per mass grave, right across there. The drug cartels fully control the area. Judicial Watch came out and reported a week and a half ago that they had credible sources that ISIS was engaged in human smuggling, probably to make money, with, quote, other than Mexicans, predominantly Middle Easterners that are the third largest group coming across. It's Mexicans, and then other than Mexicans, you'd think it would be Latin Americans and others, but it's actually Chinese, and then it's Arabs coming in. Because, well, I don't want to get into all the reasons why. The point is that's happening and unfolding, and Joe Biggs was called through this office by the FBI. We have the card. We have their names. They asked us not to give their names because they're in anti-terrorism. That's fine. We won't. But FBI agents met Biggs at El Paso Airport. Biggs called FBI field office in El Paso to confirm agent's name. The FBI agent asked not to be named. We had an associate with him due to the fact he's counterterrorism. Josh Owen sat with Biggs while agents asked him for intel on ISIS in Mexico. Agents said Judicial Watch was a credible source, and they look into what they write about and basically said that they had intel that was happening but couldn't comment. So basically confirming that they are looking at ISIS over the border. The agents wanted to know, again, what he saw, how he got in, and what things stood out in Anarpa, that area of Mexico, the most dangerous area of Mexico, bar none. So Joe Biggs will be joining us on that front. Regardless, it's real journalism. Journalists do not go into this area of Mexico. It's totally different than Juarez and other areas that are dangerous, but nothing compared to this. It's a veritable ghost town with very little foot traffic, very little vehicles, and it's where the main cartels basically battle it out. And so Joe will be joining us to break that down. And there's more news. Islamic State, ISIS, has come out, and I've told you they've done this before, and I haven't given it a lot of attention because in the final equation, it's what they're looking for. They've threatened us. They've called. Their official Twitter and Facebook has attacked us. And I asked the question, why are they allowed to operate on Twitter and Facebook? Because higher-level Western sources want to basically hype this threat, allow this threat to grow, allow attacks to happen, to then get more anti-terror funding, which can then be basically projected onto the American people themselves. But here it is. InfoWars reporter featured in new ISIS video. Footage shows dramatized clips of 9/11 attack, gruesome beheadings interspersed with Joe Biggs at the border. And they say in Arabic, yes, InfoWars, yes, Joe Biggs, you were right. We are on the border. We can come across. So that is what ISIS is saying. And the other articles on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. FBI seeks intel from Infowars reporter over ISIS border threat. You can see both those videos at Infowars.com right now. Now, as I said, getting into all of this, what happens is they pass the Patriot Act, which is up for reauthorization now, back in 2001 on the heels of 9/11. And the whole thing, I watched the hearings on C-SPAN, was focused on gun owners, veterans, libertarians, but also drug dealers, land rights activists, I mean, real criminals, but also people trying to save the country. The point was it was not focused on Al-Qaeda, now reborn bigger and badder as ISIS. It was not dealing with that. It was always about the general public. And the Patriot Act is used every few seconds now by the feds in this country to circumvent the Bill of Rights and Constitution. They've used 9/11 to basically blow giant smoking holes in the Constitution and posse comitatus, to where we have militarization of police and troops everywhere. And there's always excuses for why it's happening. There's always a good reason up front, but that's never the real reason. They got to convince the military and police, who in many cases are very patriotic and smart people, to go along with this. So at first, you know, all these different government training operations, it's about fighting Al-Qaeda, but down the road it becomes veterans, gun owners, libertarians, and now you see that in the news. In fact, CNN today, how extremist threat remains 20 years after Oklahoma City bombing. And Kurt Nimmo breaks down the article at Infowars.com with the quotes pulled out, where they say now all libertarians, conservatives, the Republican Party themselves, they're basically terrorists. Here's the headline. Corporate media, McVeigh's anti-government sentiment, now mainstream in Republican Party. Columnist repeats absurd fairy tale about Republicans and Oklahoma City bombing. Yeah, within 35 minutes of OKC bombing happening 20 years ago today in Oklahoma City, they were blaming talk radio and Rush Limbaugh by name. Now, I've made 3 films on Oklahoma City. I've interviewed the police officers that survived, the families of police officers that were tortured to death by the Justice Department and killed. I have covered every facet of it, and I'm not going to spend all day on this. I'm just going to tell you. If you're a new listener and you don't know what a self-inflicted wound is, what a false flag is, Hitler blew up, firebombed his own Reichstag right after being elected, February 27th, 1933. Nuremberg didn't even declassify it until about a decade ago. It was released. Because government didn't even want you knowing how governments operate. Because they do it so much, too. Hitler firebombed the Capitol and then basically declared martial law. The rest is history. You know what happened. He launched false flags in Operation Himmler in Gleiwitz and other areas to blame Poland for attacking German military bases. You don't think Hitler just invaded Poland and told Germans because he felt like it. He blew up his own military bases. That's declassified. That came out after World War II. So that's what a false flag is. And we've never had one so open and shut as Oklahoma City. I've interviewed Jane Graham in HUD, who for exercise would take the stairs and saw known FBI, known ATF, and German intelligence, because it later came out in the news, planning the gray sticks of butter. And the cops that showed up